See, His Honor is with us.
I see that. I see that. Well, that's good. He can keep me in line here, which
Purportedly.
won't happen, but that's okay. So, okay. Well, good evening, everyone. It's 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, June 27th. This is our last Voices of Service before International Convention next week. Next week at this time will be, I think we'll be, isn't it the 4th of July? We'll be at a baseball game.
Baseball game.
At this time. So this is Sue Petrisin. It's great to see everybody. I hope we get to see many of you in Denver next week. We thought we'd take tonight just as a way to have discussion on any of the amendments or ask any. There are some of the candidates are here. If you have any more questions you want to ask of them, it's just kind of an open forum night. I will bring up the. I'll pull up the amendments so you can see the package that's there and see if anybody has any other questions. If you have not seen, and I believe it was sent in an email yesterday, the executive director, Paul Palazzolo, did a 20-minute video on the finances of Kiwanis International and where we stand as far as income and expenses and what's happened with the numbers over the last 4 years. The goal was that would be seen by a lot of people before we get to the conference, to the convention, so that he's not taking up that time at the board or the report during the House of Delegates to do that, so that we can get into the business of the operations. He does have some other remarks, but they won't really get into that. But there's some great information. There's some great charts on that. But it was in a link that was sent to I'm thinking it was sent to everybody. It went to a lot of people yesterday. So if I get a chance, we'll try to find the link and throw it in the chat for you so that you have that. The other thing is I will look up the link for all the videos that we've done this year are on the YouTube site under Voices of Service with Sue P. All those are there, including the last week's video with the candidates, and then the candidates, and then all the amendments and all the dues and all those sessions are there. So there's quite a bit of information there if anybody is looking for more information, but I'll make sure that link gets in the program as well. And I am going to share my screen and pull up the amendments so that we can, I'm going to find them here, talk about the amendments tonight, or at least give people a chance to, maybe you don't want that page. What do we got here?
So while you're looking at that, the link to Paul's talk to the delegates 20-minute recording is in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I just downloaded the stuff. Let's just go to the Kiwanis website. We'll find it.
There's a third tab at the top, looks like it.
Does it? I see. I got this. I hate that stupid bar. Ah, there it is. I don't like the bar. It always shows up at the top.
I do. How can you not like bars?
Well, this black bar, the one that has all those white numbers on it and stuff.
Oh, that bar.
I'm talking about that bar. Okay, so I'm just gonna leave the mic open, and if people have any comments that they want to talk about with the dues adjustments or the dues proposals that are out there. As we mentioned at the last session when we had the program with Paul, and we've had several sessions on the costs and stuff like that. There are 3 dues proposals out there. This one, of course, is the one that was submitted by the International Board. And what we talked about the last time was the fact that if this passes, then there's potential that the other 2 dues amendments will be withdrawn by the proposers. But that's just the thought. We're not sure there really what will happen. But this is the first proposed amendment, is to do the increase the Kiwanis International dues to $77, $50, and $34 respective for each tier. And again, this is and to support all of our programs. There will be 2 workshops at the convention, one on Thursday afternoon at, I believe it's at 4 o'clock, and one on Friday morning at 9 to 8 or 9 before the House of Delegates, to answer any other questions about the dues increases with myself, and the CFO, Bob Broderick, will be there with Paul. We're going to talk about the dues and answer any other questions that people may have at that point, but talk about why the board hasn't adjusted the dues in small amounts and the fact that those are there. So does anybody have any comments they want to make on their first dues amendment? or the amendment in general. If anybody has anything, I'm going to open it up for you to just chat away. Let's see here.
Anastasia, we can barely hear you if you're talking. Okay.
And Dawn asked the question, am I correct that the dues will go in numerical order? That is correct. So each amendment will be taken as an amendment by itself. You can't combine like amendment 1 and amendment 4 and amendment 5 and decide which one you want. Somebody asked me that, can we have multiple choices? I'm like, nope. So amendment 1 will come before the House. Should that pass, as we said, the other ones may be withdrawn. But if this fails, then we'll just continue on. So nothing that happened in amendment 1 will continue on.
Sue, the only way that that could be different if there is a motion in the House to change the order.
Yeah, subject to a motion from the floor, they stay in that order.
Correct. And if someone wishes to make that motion, it's something that has to be turned in ahead of time.
Correct.
Or from the floor. There will be documents at the front of the House for those to be changed. And then I know that in the video that Kathy posted, a lot of this information is also touched upon with the dues in the different tiers. So any questions that anyone has about the dues proposal or anything else that's you want to talk about or ask about that we might be able to help you with? It is effective October 1 of this year. And I will tell you that I was in my club this week, we had I will say a sixth person turned in an application since October 1. Kathy, her lady's name is actually Kathy. She went to one of our other peer organizations and decided they were too old and didn't have any fun and came to Kiwanis. And after the second meeting, when she said, well, that's a bunch of crap, we're like, okay, well, she fits right in with us, right? She was right in. So she asked us what our dues are. In our club, our dues are 180 for the year. And we said, but, we do prorate them. So it would be, 90-ish or less than that for the year. And she goes, well, can I just pay the 180? And we're like, sure, no problem. And she goes, why would you prorate dues? And I said, well, we tried to explain it to her. And then she says, well, and there's a dues increase that might happen as well, right? We're like, yep, might be 25, which would take it to, the 205. And she said, that's all? And I'm like, yeah. So here was a person who had only been in our meeting like 3 or 4 weeks and had heard the conversation there and didn't seem to have an issue with it. And we don't pay for, we pay for our meals on our own. And then we have a corporate membership with one of the local library, and one of their members, they've had some transition. So one of their librarians is going to join us our club, and she's a younger member. I think she's probably 23, 24. And she said, well, what if I want to join on my own and not under the corporate membership? Well, we're like, you're welcome to do that. And she goes, so what would it cost me? And we're like, well, it's 180 for the year. And she goes, that's all? And I'm like, okay, so this is a person who was in her probably 70s and a person who was in her 20s saying, that's all you charge? That's all? And we're like, and I looked at her and I said, yeah. And she said, and she had belonged to one of the other clubs. And she goes, why? She paid X amount of dollars in this other club. She goes, so 180 is like a drop. It's nothing. And she goes, can I split it into 4 payments? We're like, sure. She goes, I can do that too. So this is two ends of the spectrum, right? Who felt that, the international dues, and because our club dues are $86 or $76 of that 180. So she didn't neither one of them seemed to have a problem, and said because we said we ordered her name tag. She goes, you don't even have my money yet. And we're like, well, we know we're going to get it. Right. But she wasn't worried about it. Dawn, go ahead.
I thought it was curious that the post on Facebook about drop in what your dues are, there was such a range, and I think it was very telling. Like, some obviously included food and some didn't, but you're still not sure how much or how much their district charges. Or was curious to know too, like how much, if they don't provide food, like how much their club gets from that also, not just the international and district, but club dues. I just thought the wide range was so startling.
why don't you put in the chat what your dues are? I mean, we know what international are, but if you want to put your district dues and your club dues in it would be interesting to see how the breakdown is. I mean, when I think that my club charges $76 out of that 180, and then we pay for our own meals.
And there are clubs that do not charge the full amount, and the club covers some of the cost of dues too. So the range even gets complicated more by that. And Sue and I, when we were training through our district in the spring about the dues amendments, we had the members call out from their clubs how much their dues were. And there was a vast difference in the dues just within our own district because the club dues are so different based on various factors. And I think that's one of the hardest thing to get across to membership in general is that the dues we're talking about is the international portion of the dues. It's not the district dues. It is not the club dues. It is the international portion. And sometimes just our day-to-day members don't realize or recognize that breakdown.
Well, and I would say that I know that at one time our club used to include our meals and our costs, right? And that was you paid for all your meals, whether you were there or not. And back then it was like, this has been probably 10 years, it was like $18 for a lunch, right? And we're like, and we were at a facility on campus where 18 was that barely covered costs because the place we had been to for so long had been there. And people that belonged to other organizations that were coming, they're like, well, we're paying 25 for the same thing, you're paying 18. It's like, well, the manager of the place is our member, so we're doing all that kind of stuff. But I look now and on average, I pay $20 a week for lunch. So when you add that in and go, $80, 20 times 52, I mean, you can really, your dues, if someone says that my dues are $1,000, it could be true if you're including all those meals. So yeah, here's one, Linda, 175 and 145. So it just depends on it really depends on the club, but it's getting people to understand that the money it's the amendment is for the international dues.
And keep in mind, a lot, like you said, some clubs charge the meals with the program. I mean, our club, pre-COVID, we charged $60 a month, but that included the meals. And post-COVID, we changed our whole operational way of doing things and the model, and it's now $25. And that includes the international, the district, and what we need to run the club. But you buy your own lunch like your club does.
Right. Okay, so Amendment 2. I don't see anything else in the chat. This one has been submitted by the International Board. It's to reduce the number of tiers from 3 to 2 and adjust the amounts. And for those that were around in 2003, that's when the delegates approved this new dues tier structure. And if I remember correctly, we are the only organization that does a structured dues in tiers.
That's correct.
The other organizations don't do that. And the goal was, we're implementing discounted dues for clubs and nations with lower per capita income. So the goal is to go from a tier A, leave tier A as it is. Tier C would be the only so-called discounted rate, and we would eliminate tier B. But if I remember correctly, and board members around the board that are here help me correct, but there were very few clubs in tier B.
Correct. And the clubs in tier B essentially are going to move into tier C.
Right.
Because we raised the standard for the split.
Right. And it's always the question of how do you base those numbers? And because it is based on the per capita income,
Gross national income.
And we could have a 3-hour discussion just alone on how you should calculate that, right? Where do you go for? But that was the one that was there. And then the big thing is It says in here, the vast majority of Kiwanis peer service organizations do not offer a discount. And I think the other thing that I know I haven't heard a lot about is the fact that sometimes when you discount things, people think that the perception is that it's not as valuable.
Yep.
Right. You know, if I charge, $100 to myself and I only charge Kathy 50, it's like, well, what is Kathy getting less of, right? When she's not getting anything different. She's getting that same experience. And we also know that we need to support, our organizations across the world. Joe?
I want to point out how the people in tier C and B don't necessarily get the same amount of stuff as what we do in the US. So they don't even have the option to have a secretary dashboard to make changes and add people. So I just kind of point that out. There are differences in service.
And let's see, someone just wrote in chat.
There's
Oh.
a slight, Don, there's only a slight decrease in income. I think that's in the notes somewhere in there. It's pretty insignificant.
To simplify, yeah.
Yeah, the ironic thing, when we had this discussion, we talked about the cost per member of running the organization, and the cost per member isn't covered by the tier B dues. This was implemented in 2003 as a membership recruitment effort. It was designed to increase membership from the developing countries. And what's happened instead, back to what Sue said about value, is that Lions have added hundreds of thousands of members from developing countries without a tiered dues structure. So they're including people in their organization who are able to pay the dues that Rotary charges, or that Lions charges. Rotary does the same thing. They've been more successful in Europe. So while it was designed to increase the number of members, if you look, tier B had 7,928 members, or sorry, C, and tier B had 4,244. So of the 170,000 members we have, fewer than 10,000 of them are in those, or 12,000 of them are in those tiers. So it's a pretty small, less than 10%. And there was one more thing, but I forgot it. So.
Well, and I think, Joe had made the comment about what they're provided versus other clubs, right? Unfortunately, that does happen.
Yep.
Because of the technology, and some of that stuff just doesn't work in some countries that we're doing it in, right? So you couldn't say to them, hey, here's the same services, because it may not be there. So this would be, there's a minimal amount of difference.
Yeah, and if you look at where the amount for tier B and the amount for tier 2, $9,999 or less, $9,999 or less.
Yeah,
So it's the exact same.
it is.
Right. So this would, this is a separate amendment from 1. So if 1 passes or fails, whichever, then we would go to 2, and this would be the same thing, whether this passes or fails. Okay, Amendment 3 is the Kiwanis International Board composition. This was also submitted by the Kiwanis International Board to reduce the number of trustees from 15 to 12. Would start with elections beginning in 2025 to be completed by 2027. The amendment would generate a cost savings of $18,750 per year over the current levels. And the board has, put the information in here about, the reasoning behind that. And basically it's represented by the global membership, with the reduction in members to the system to support, the allocation of trustees. and the number that's really needed. So the United States and the Pacific Canada would have 7 rather than 9. The Asia Pacific region would still have 2 guaranteed trustees. The Europe region would have 2. The Canada and the Caribbean would have 1, and then the at-large seat would be eliminated. The at-large seat was originally intended for parts of the world not otherwise represented on the board, and it's typically been an additional seat for Asia, Pacific, or Europe, which are already guaranteed 2 seats. So, and of course, the system of allocation would be reevaluated every 10 years. Implementation over a 3-year system, and it does not impact the offices of president, president-elect, vice president, or immediate past president.
The way that'll look is that this year we'll vote for 3 trustees. Next year in the US, we would vote for 2 trustees. The year following, we would vote for 2 trustees. And the following year, the at-large position would be up and it would be dropped. And we would vote again for 3 trustees from North America.
So that discussion on that, I've heard some discussion on it, but not a lot. So I'm interested if there's any discussion on that.
Yeah, I have to present this one. So if there are any questions, I would love to know what they are so I can address them.
There you go, Kathy. And I do know that Linda is presenting number 1. I'm not sure who's presenting number 2.
Have there
I
been,
always question amendments that lessen the impact from the membership. And this lessens the impact from the membership. Like this year, we have 5 people running for 3. I mean, next year we may have 6 people running for 2.
Correct.
It doesn't make sense. I understand that it's based upon the membership drop, but I just don't see the value of amendments that lessen input from local club members in the Kiwanis. And I'd like to know the argument in favor of it, other than a few bucks.
Well, one thing is that the Board of Trustees should be representative of the membership. And when North America has 9 members on the board, it has an over-representation as compared to the number of members in Europe and Asia. That's one thing. The other thing is that when the size, and Greg will have to correct me on this, when the size was established, but the size of the board was established when we were at least twice the size that we are now, if not more. And what it takes to support that, what it costs for us to do that, it's a lot greater than it was when we had more members, right? So you got fewer people. Sorry, I just got distracted by something else. You have fewer people who are supporting a board the same size, and fewer people being represented by, it'd be like the Montana Senate or the Montana representative seat. You got 1 person represents 1 million people. In other places, 1 person represents fewer than 1 million people. So it's a balancing act between where our members are, Europe, Asia Pacific, Canada, and the US, and the number of people who are sitting in decision-making chairs. Does that make sense, Eric? Because
No,
right now there are 9 of us on that board,
I understand that.
and there are fewer members in the US.
I understand that too. I don't think the answer for changing that is to reduce member input.
So can I ask a question? How does that reduce member input? I'm just going to play devil's advocate.
You only have 7 versus 9. You have fewer people being given the opportunity to serve. Convince me otherwise. I haven't,
Well,
I haven't heard a convince me argument.
it-
I mean,
it
someone
could
still
be-
has to go to all the conventions. Someone still has to make all the decisions. Someone still has to make all the visits. With less
Right.
trustees, you're putting more tasks upon the current people.
Right, but Eric, if let's say it's 10 people represented by each trustee. ASPAC has 20, Europe has 20, and America has 70. ASPAC has 2 representatives, Europe has 2 representatives, and America has 9 representatives. So it's a misrepresentation of our membership on the board to have that many from the United States. That's the problem.
Anybody else there that wants to add into that?
Linda, Gary,
Linda, Gary,
Greg.
Greg?
Greg said I was right about the size.
Yeah, I think Kathy, you have handled it very well, and thank you for that. I think the financial piece is still a piece of this, and it has been asked of all of the boards to reduce their footprints. So it's not just the KI board, it's the CKI board, it's the Key Club board, it's the Children's Fund board. All of them are reducing their footprint in order to be better accountable to our members for the money that we spend. And I hear what you're saying, Eric, and I respect that. But when we've done the cross review of numbers of representatives to number of members, we're way high from where we should probably be.
So Christine King has a comment. So then should we increase trustees in areas that has a larger representation of members with less trustees?
Can you hear me? This is great.
Yes, go ahead.
What it is, as you can see, the operational organization operations committee looked at this, which is I was the chairman of, 12-member board across the whole world. What we went into this looking at is not necessarily the cost savings on the front end. It's a byproduct. What it was that we looked at our membership, like Kathy said earlier, that we were not at the membership where we used to be, of where a large board was determining the policy and procedures. We looked at all the other service organizations in the U.S., outside of the U.S. and the world, and determined that a certain number is what an adequately board should be, that number. And then we started breaking down who should be on this board and based upon what. We looked at the regions that we had, and we wanted to make sure the regions were adequately represented. That's why you have Canada with one region, Canada and ECC. Also, you had the ASPAC region has 2, the Europeans have 2, and when it left to say, all right, what is the United States going to have to do with PNW? Well, then we started dividing out based upon the number of members in each one of those regions. And it happened to play out that we were going to do away with the at-large because it roams around where we would save 1 there, and the United States would be reduced by 2. And we left in portions that's why we look at it in 10 years, is because whichever region increases in membership could possibly gain a other trustee at the expense of someone else, because we're based upon membership representation across the board of where all of our regions are represented and have say-so based upon their memberships. That's how we kind of divided it out.
Thanks, Greg. Any other thoughts? Questions?
Sue, this is Marge from Eastern Canada, the Caribbean. I'm
Hi,
sorry,
Marge.
I'm slow typing and I'm late for arriving. My apologies.
No worries.
This board changes. Is it based on percentage of membership? So you've got the United States and part of Canada, not much of it, calculated together. And we all know that North America, both US and Canada's membership's gone down, whereas the Caribbean is climbing. The Asian Pacific is, I hear, is growing, but I can't tell you what the percentages are. So when this is being presented, will that information be there? Or where can I get that information before I make a decision?
Greg.
Marge, I can tell you, this is Greg here, Marge. My committee looked at that, and what we did break it down is that first off, we wanted to make sure the regions in the world were represented. That's why you have Canada and ECNC have one trustee on the board. It's guaranteed. Putting North America all together, we didn't think it was fair for Canada and ECNC to be represented with North America, because then the United States would probably dominate that all of a sudden. So that's why we kept Canada and ECNC together and guaranteed one seat. I can tell you this is that based upon the membership, if you go by membership numbers of the world, Canada and ECNC does not come up to one, but we give it one because we knew there would possibly be membership increases with particularly the Caribbean region, of where they could get back to one. And I remember a number on the membership of the United States, Pacific Northwest, it actually came out to 7.2. I remember that number for some reason. And that's where the 7 number come from, which it can increase based upon if the United States and Pacific Northwest increase in membership, then someone else across the world could be. European districts have somewhat plateaued to where they're not increasing as much as they used to, which we kind of warned them to say, you got to be careful, because if you start decreasing, you could possibly lose a seat on the board based upon the membership totality. And that's about a 10-year way in order to determine how the numbers. It's kind of like reapportionment of the seats you have based upon the membership in the world and those guaranteed regions.
Okay, so the other question is, where can I find those details? I put a call into the membership services and asking for them to provide me a complete list of all countries that are involved with Kiwanis International, because I was doing another type of research for another matter altogether, and they could not provide that to me. I was shocked. They sent me a diagram of the world and showed the regions, and they didn't even include, and this really upset me, I'm not going to hide the fact, there was no listings of our countries in the Caribbean, which is part of Eastern Canada. I was shocked. So where can I get the information? Because membership services could not provide that to me. And I still want to continue on another matter in regards to knowing all the countries, because I have a thought of what I'd like to do.
Question, Mark, is that either a member of the board or Paul Palanzoa being the executive director, you do have a trustee sitting on the board, that being Hope, that you could possibly start with her and start trying to see if you can get that information from there.
I started with actually Hope Marks because I thought that they would be able to provide me the listing. She gave me all the districts, but nobody that I contacted could provide me with a complete listing of the countries that we are in as Kiwanis. And I would dearly love to have that.
Okay, I've made a note of that.
Thank you.
I'm hoping that my friends on the KI board have made a note of that as well.
Now, Renee Booker we get monthly reports, and that covers the globe.
Yep.
Yes,
Mark-
and
Mark-
it's by district.
By district, yes.
My
Right.
district.
And-
And I
By
And
know
Marge, that's-
club, within division, within districts.
I mean, I sent a response back to the membership staff person I was dealing with and thanked them very much for the listing of countries. I will ensure that the countries in the Caribbean that are associated with Eastern Canada, don't worry about it. I know who they are. So, but that was a disappointment, because I when I look at membership and I look at the board makeup, I want to know that we are taking care of the globe and not just taking care of the, for want of a better word, that North America.
Marge, if you would send me your email in a direct message.
Yep.
So I
Can
make
do.
sure I have your email address. I'm sure
Okay.
I do, but that way I can have it, and then we'll with my colleagues that are here, we'll find out what we need to find out for you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. That's a great question. We'll find that out. Okay, so we got that. All right, let's go to amendment number 4. Election of district trustees. So also proposed by the Kiwanis International Board to allow a member from outside a district's region to serve as a district trustee if no one from within the region is willing or able to serve. So I believe that this is very similar to the one we have for lieutenant governors.
Exactly.
Where the lieutenant governors can do that, but this allows for those districts that have trustees to be able to do the same thing. Previously, that it was the district trustee had to be a member of the club in that region, and now this opens it up to the fact that if you're in a region next door or around the corner, that you can have that flexibility when vacancies occur.
That really doesn't encourage succession planning. It's my only thought to that. Sorry,
Good
it's
point.
Marge again.
Yep. Well, it's interesting that you say that because I had someone that visited our club a couple of weeks ago and thought that we had hired someone to go out and recruit members for our club. And I was thinking the same thing. They're like, I said, well, where'd you get that? Like, well, you guys have added so many members. And we're like, okay, well, we have a succession plan, right? And our whole goal is to have a succession plan. So we're trying to promote that kind of stuff. But they thought part of our succession plan was hiring a person to come in and to recruit members. I'm like, well, we're really trying to have a succession plan. But it's something. Go ahead, John.
I said, to me, that reads as if a district has a succession plan and it's not working, it allows for them to, for that time period of that one election to do that.
Right.
Right.
Well, and this impacts a very few number of districts because not many districts have trustees. Nebraska, Iowa has trustees, Pennsylvania has trustees, and both of them had seats that were empty this year. So if there's someone who's willing to serve and they don't live in that particular trustee region, this allows them to serve. It's the same thing that we did last year for lieutenant governors, allowing lieutenant governors to serve outside of their divisions.
Which can very much help with the succession planning because there's someone there. If there's no one there, they're not getting any information.
Correct.
If there's someone there, then they're getting some information. And then hopefully someone goes, wait a minute, that person's not a member of our division or our district. Why are they representing us? So it might put
it has to be from the same district though, just another division,
Correct.
right? Or
Correct.
another region.
Correct. That's
Another
correct.
It seems similar to me to last year. It's a shame that the circumstance exists, but it should be an availability to have somebody serve.
Right. And you don't want to discourage. I mean, if you're in a region or a division where you got 3 people that want to be lieutenant governor, right, and you only need one, you could ask them to keep going or say, well, hey, you got to wait your turn. All right. Question on amendment number 5. So this will all be as a result of getting to this amendment would be as a result of amendment number 1. Should amendment number 1 pass, the PNW, the district board, may withdraw this. We don't know. That will have to happen when we get to convention. Should amendment number 1 fail, then this would be the next dues increase proposal that would be looked at by the House. And this would have a 3-year implementation period, correct? Yes. Which would take the dues, as you can see here, currently 52, it would go to 67 for 24-25 in tier A, 77 for 25, 26, 82 for 26, 27. And then should the tier amendment, which I believe is Amendment 2, if that were to pass, this would already, that means these two would already be, B and C would be 1.
And their dues would be the B dues.
And their Bs would, right. I got the Bs and yeah, okay, got it. So it would just roll the due structure out over, we would get to 82 by 26, 27. And then proposal 6, amendment 6 is so if 1 were to fail and 5 were to fail, we would go to amendment 6. But we would do 2, 3, and 4 before that. So proposed amendment 6 would be a dues increase phased in over 4 years with an automatic increase of $1 to $2 US every year thereafter, which would put us in a position that we would not be coming to the House every year for a dues increase. This would allow the board to have an increase of 1 to 2 per year after that. So it would go to, let's see if I can find our numbers here. So it would take a tier A, would go from 52 to 77 to 92 to 98 to 100 by 27, 28. So this is 1 year longer than the amendment before. And then each year would be a $2 per year afterwards. Some call that a cost of living, some call that just an adjustment, but it would be a $2 per year afterwards. So we would go from 100 to 102 to 104. But if I remember correctly, and board members correct me if I'm wrong, it's that dues increase would be as necessary, correct? Or is it an automatic?
It's
I believe it's-
automatic.
Yeah, I believe it
Okay.
says automatic.
Okay,
Shall increase by $2.
there you go. Okay. And then I guess, of course, B and C would, if number 2 passes, then B and C would be combined again. So, and I know one thing that has come up, we've had that question before, is like, well, why doesn't the board, just increase it? Well, the board doesn't have the right to do that. They can't make that decision. It has to come to the House. So this would be a schedule of payments through, until someone else were to bring it back up. And one of the things the thing is there is that if the hopefully the international dues would not need to be increased by a significant amount, right? We wouldn't have to come back and say, well, we need, another $50 if we were doing this in the right that way. But we would have the initial lump sum for the first 4 years. Well, actually, when you look at it, with 25 to 26 to 26, 27 would be $6, and that would be $2. That kind of starts the $2 increment after that. But we wouldn't get to this one unless number 1 and number 5 failed. Number 7 is, so any questions, I should say, any questions on 5 or 6, or any thoughts on that?
Hey, Sue, this is Scott Sims. I just make a comment about the whole dues initiative. I really hope that everybody on this call will do whatever they can to see a dues increase passed. I've not been involved in this initiative these last 2 years. Personally, I'm for amendment number 1, but I don't think I've ever seen so much time and effort and energy invested on something so small when you think about $2 per month for something that is so valuable to us. And I think we do our membership a disservice if we continue to have this debate and this remains an issue year after year. So I'm very committed to it. Hope it'll pass. Hope we'll be able to then turn our attention to things that, quite frankly, I think are more important to our organization, like membership. And while that has been one of the objections, we've not mentioned it tonight, but one of the objections has been, was this going to hurt opening new clubs? Is this going to hurt membership? And I've heard of other examples where that's not been the case. I can tell you anecdotally that at the House of Delegates, where I became governor in Alabama, we raised our dues, our district dues, from $21 to $36. And the following year, rather than see a decrease because of a backlash to increased dues, we had our first membership increase in 2 decades. So, I think we've got such a value proposition to go promote people. And again, I'm so appreciative of all the effort that people have gone into to the international board and those of you who have been involved in this. I don't think you could have done more this year to educate people and give them so many opportunities to be informed on that. And I hope the rest of us will leverage your efforts by promoting this over the course of the next 10 days.
Thank you, Scott.
I might add, Scott didn't mention it, but actually what was brought to that one, because I was a counselor for them that year, was less, and they brought up actually raising it even more and was passed.
That's correct, Gary.
And
And
I have been on new club openings and no one balks at the price. We have set that at 168. We just tell people it's $14 a month and we don't have anybody that blinks. They just go, okay, well, sign me up.
Other thoughts or questions? And as a person who went through this in 2014, 15, and 16, where they failed, those years, in fact, happened to be talking to Paul Palazzolo about it the other day, and I'm like, I was there when it failed those 2 years. And if you don't want to, as a board member, I was so depressed because, we see the value of what we're doing and what's going on. And then to say, oh, well, no. And you're like, wait a minute. And honestly, I will echo Scott, because as a person for the last 2 years, I've done nothing but work on dues increase. I mean, I've spent a lot of time learning and, talking about this. And I think of the number of hours that I could be putting into helping other things that we're doing as an organization.
Amen.
For that.
I agree that we definitely need the increase. I think last year there were some issues with presentation, that there weren't enough forms. The room was too small. The rooms were too small. They didn't hold the people who wanted to come in and ask questions and learn about them. So I hope that this year, the 2 forums about the dues increase, which we need, I agree, but I hope are bigger and that the KI is better equipped to address issues, because last year it was a cluster.
Yeah, we do have, I will tell you, I know the rooms are much bigger. And there are no competing workshops during either one of those times. So it truly will be the only subject that's being discussed at that time. And it gets to a point where it's like, how much information, and we will all agree that after last year, one of the things that, the feedback I gave was that it wasn't started early enough, right? You bring it in February or March and people are like, what are you talking about? Right. I mean, it's just not, people need time to think about stuff like that.
Well, you're right, Stu, but it wasn't presented well, and the parliamentarian had no clue how to rule on the different changes. It made the whole thing a big mess.
So that was part of the, the thing when I started talking about it in October, right? Let's get this information out there. Let's pull it. Let's let people know that I know in Michigan, we presented it at 8 different sessions and it's been all over. And I think that, my goal is that we can, my goal is that we can say, okay, thank you. We've got our dues increase. Let's move on and figure out what our next project is, right? What are we going to do next? Right? This is here. Let's move forward. And I realize that everybody's is in different situations financially. But I also think that we go back to the value of being a member. And when I have someone who's 24 and someone who's 77 say $180, what are you complaining about? I have to go, okay. And we haven't had trouble with that, but I think it's all how it's presented. I completely agree with that, right? It's all about what is the value that this organization offers to us, and rebuilding some of that trust. I mean, I can tell you that there were days I was on the board and I'm like, okay, what else can we do, right? What else can we do? We're hoping that we're there for a reason. All right, proposed amendment number 8. Capital District Board has proposed this one. This one has actually been in discussion for the last several years. I know the numbers for the passing of this have been slowly going down, as or I should say, slowly raising. But this would be to allow a club for, well, candidate nominations and initial review proposed amendments at the House or at the convention, and then the final voting to take place versus secure remote voting. Something that happened. It's interesting. I did some research myself, and neither Rotary nor Lions do remote voting. And that was one of the big things I kept hearing. Well, all other organizations are doing it. Well, they don't. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because that was one of the things that, you know, not like we have to be like them, but, you know, those are organizations that in the top, the 3 groups that neither one of them do that. Not that I'm saying I, you know, agree or disagree, but I thought that was an interesting point that neither one of those organizations allow that. But this would, you know, there's pros and cons on this. I've heard the pros that it'll kill or the cons that it'll kill the convention. I've heard the pros that it'll involve board members. So this is really, you know, the aspect of, you know, what is a personal opinion? What does your club suggest? It would not change the convention of the House. You know, it would be a voting on an annual business presented during the convention to take place via secure voting remote methods, which would have to be, you know, taken care of. And yes, there would be, like it says, there would be, you know, you'd have to look at the timing, right? Because you couldn't say we're voting at, you know, 5 o'clock Eastern time when we've got clubs all over the world. So all that stuff would have to be taken care of. But the length of time the polls would be open would allow for multiple opportunities. So there would be a lot of, you know, there's some things that would have to do there, right? I mean, there's some work that has to be done, but there are vendors that do that type of stuff. So, but it's one of those things that, you know, you got to look at the big picture of, you know, what is that from all the voting. It says that House of Delegates will be live streamed. And of course, this isn't, you know, it is an expense. $60,000 for voting, current costs. That financial impact is about what it costs us now. So something to think about. I think there's a lot of things behind this that you really got to think about, you know, representation and, you know, would it kill a convention? I don't really know. Some people believe it would, some people don't. What is the purpose of a convention? So there's a lot of information in there to think about. So that's what most of this is. I don't know if anybody has any specific thoughts or questions or comments on that.
So it's Marge again.
Hey, Marge.
One of the thoughts I have is the fact that when we sat through that vote last year, we had a small percentage of clubs represented there. And clubs are paying the dues. So by leaving it to the convention, then you're not including them. So we're not being very inclusive in regards to the management of our organization. Now, to me, a convention is education, fellowship, and exchange of ideas. So why should a division or district, for that matter, not be represented have the opportunity to vote? I look at it, I was the only representative from Division 11. Oh, there goes my phone. Division 11 in Eastern Canada and the Caribbean, because the majority of people can't afford to travel. I wanted to be there because I do like having the fellowship. I like the courses that are offered. Plus, I was there to vote representing Division 11 when it comes to all aspects.
Right. So yeah, I mean, that's a great point, you know, that this would allow that representation. David.
Yes. You know, part of the reason Capital, by the way, I'm David Laurie. I'm past governor from Capital District. Part of the reason our district has been promoting this is exactly what Marge has said. We feel this is an inclusive and an equity issue. The fact is that every single club If you go and you read the bylaws of Kiwanis International, we are made up of clubs, and every club should have the right to vote on the people who are leading our organization and the decisions that we are making, exactly like we talked about with some of these other amendments, to be able to vote on dues, to be able to vote on the tiers. And this is a way of doing it. It's the House of Delegates is just one part of convention, but on the other hand, is not everyone has the opportunity. I know a lot of Kiwanians, both in North America and in other parts of the world, who I know are not capable of coming to convention, but they should be able to still have a voice in the organization and be able to vote and be able to participate in the decisions that are made. And that's why we put this amendment up.
David, do you remember what the percentages were the last couple of years that it was proposed? Because
it is less than 20% of the clubs.
Right, but what I'm saying is the vote that was taken.
Oh, no, unfortunately, I don't have that data handy on me. Unfortunately, my executive director is probably the one who's got it on the tip of his tongue.
I know it's in my files at home, and I'm not at the office.
Yeah,
but I know that
Jeff's in Norway right now. So
yeah, the percentage has gotten better, so to say. There was more people that voted in favor of it the second time around.
It would not change the way this is written, and the way my district has worked with the board is that we would still do all the same things we do at convention. You would still hear the speeches. You would still be able to vote. It's just that there would be a window for the clubs that are not there to still be able to have their input and put it into
have their input. Correct.
So the results might be delayed a little bit. So
right. So yes, the results could be delayed. Well, because if you need to give people 6 or 8 or 12 hours, whatever the decision is.
Yeah.
Because what time it is for us is it's 9 p.m. here, it might be 9 a.m. someplace else, or vice versa. So
yeah, and I happen to belong to an internet club that does have members across the entire Kiwanis world, and trust me, finding a meeting time that works is very hard.
Yes, very difficult. All right, thank you for that, David. Appreciate that. Marge, thanks for your comments. Joe, did you have a comment, or you just waving?
I was waving at David, who was in that group. Yay.
Okay, and then the next amendment is the one on the purchase of alcohol, to prohibit the use of any Kiwanis International revenue, including dues, fees, or non-dues revenue, to purchase alcohol. Proposed by the Kiwanis Club of Barrie, Ontario, Canada. I know they were on the last time we talked about this. I don't know if anybody was able to join us or not today. But the information is there about what the proposers, why they advocate, the reason, and the board's position of why they don't support the amendment. Specifically that our existing policy, so the proposer, they're not opposed to alcohol being served, but they don't think it should be paid for by donations or dues. They would allow a cash bar. Image to the public and to Kiwanis' corporate donors is important. And they talk about the organization committed to cost savings. The club considers that using organization's fund for alcohol may be against board's policy not to accept advertising of alcoholic beverages. The board's position is that the purchase of alcoholic beverages for any event produced or sponsored by Kiwanis International or its entities shall be funded by non-dues revenue, including but not limited to registration fees, separate ticket sales, and or third-party sponsorship or underwriting. Largest expense on alcohol beverages in conjunction with Kiwanis International, of course. Beer, wine, and other beverages are offered at specific events and paid from registration income or tickets. Second highest annual expenses from other meetings, which is written under such cases underwritten by a third-party sponsor. Any purchase of alcohol beverages during the year is paid for the sponsorship or the participants themselves. And I will tell you that we get a bar bill every time we go to an event. And I know that the numbers that they had, and in fact, I questioned this, I asked again, it was estimated to be $7,000 to $15,000, but I do know that, like, for our Saturday night dinner that we're having at the convention, that there is, prices in there for beverages. So any questions or thoughts on that? And as a person who raises money otherwise outside of Kiwanis, it would be very difficult to tell a sponsor that gives you X amount of dollars to say, hey, here's X amount of dollars, you can do this, but you can't spend it on alcohol. And, the other thing I think we have to look at is that we're an international organization. And, alcoholic beverages, drinking alcohol beverages, it's would be right. It's the normal, right? It's normal. And it would be I agree that it's, the proposal is US centric, because there were many days that, you're drinking wine or whatever at any time of the day or night in other countries. It's their normal beverage of choice. So, but that's my personal opinion. As a person who does some fundraising, it would be very difficult to tell someone that, sorry, we'll take your money, but it's like usually if someone gives you the money, you'll take it. And then the last one is also proposed by the same club, and this is the first class travel. That the club is proposing that you cannot use any revenue, dues, fees, or non-dues revenue to purchase first class or business class tickets for board members or staff or their spouses and companions. The board is, this proposal is the board is committed to reducing, or proposers committed to reducing costs, should not use any dues or donated funds to add for comfort of a volunteer staff. They volunteered or were hired, does not want the image of KI International diminished in the eyes as a result of VIP lounges, first class tickets. Club members and district officers pay for spouses travel out of their pocket. And board members should do the same. And then the same thing, the KI procedure is, and that's been there as fact, is it's only with approval may an intercontinental flight more than 7 hours be authorized for a traveler using their own resources. They can do that, but the president or the president-elect, with approval of the executive director, the president may fly business class for any flight that's more than 7 hours. Kiwanis International staff adheres to the same rules. Exceptions already included in the annual budget. Travelers are allowed to use their own points to upgrade. Self-imposed policies demonstrate responsible stewardship. Amendment would prohibit the sponsorship of airfare upgrades by third parties using non-dues revenue. So, questions or thoughts on that one?
I would just add that it's not uncommon for board members to not even use their own points for upgrades because of the optics. If I'm on a flight with other Kiwanis members, even though I have the points or I could pay for an upgrade, I don't do it so that other club members don't misunderstand why I'm sitting in Comfort Plus or in first class. Because it's not unusual either for an airline to come to some of us who travel a lot, not just for Kiwanis, but for work, and come to us and offer us an upgrade, move us. But I've been known to turn those down when I'm heading for a Kiwanis event because, again, because of the optics.
Marge? I saw you take off your mute, so.
Okay, so from my perspective, just as a member of the organization, nothing to do with whoever makes the amendments. If I'm going to travel for my club, I don't even charge them. When I went down to Jamaica and for the district convention, it's out of my pocket, which is a little extreme, I agree. But if you are on the international board and you start at whether it's economy or business and you go to first class, I truly believe that you should make that difference. And if someone challenges you, you can show that you paid the difference. That's the problem we're having. I'm having. I don't agree with giving first class, and you have the exception to the here, exception to that. I think the policies and procedures need to be amended. and it clearly stated that you pay the difference, whether the board says it's okay, it's gonna be business class, but you want to travel first class, you pay the difference out of your pocket. And when it comes to alcohol, which I didn't respond to, I had to calm down a little bit. I drink a lot. In fact, if you come to when I'm at conventions, not on a regular basis, clarify that. Come to my room at the district convention, which I share with another Kiwanian. That's where, if you want a free drink, you come. It's like, and again, it's a selfish reason, because I can then get other people who I may or may not know and get their ideas. You want a drink? I want a drink. I pay for it. I have never been associated with any professional organization or service organization that picks up the tab for my bar bill. And the sponsors, if you're saying the sponsors are giving you money and then you're going to thank them, that's a different situation. You give the sponsors a free drink for thanking them, but the Kiwanians and the board members that are there, I'm sorry, don't use it, the money that they gave you for your consumption of alcohol. Or if you get a airline that suddenly comes up and wants to sponsor you to first class. No. If they gave a sponsorship money for an event, thank them, and thank them with alcohol, but you don't consume it. And airlines up here in Canada, we don't have very successful airlines anymore, but we got money from Air Canada. And I flew out down to Jamaica in Air Canada, and I would not do the offer they made me. In fact, coming back from Jamaica, I had the very back seat, because the money Air Canada provided to one of my functions was for the function. You should not use sponsorship money for members' consumption or comfort. That's where I'm coming from. And you'll find that fairly common. I got to turn the light down because I'm really not that pale. That is something that is supported by many Kiwanis I know, both in my district and outside my district. Sponsorship money is for Kiwani's business. Anyways, enough said.
No, thank you. Thank you. All right, well, that is the last of proposals for the amendments. We are at the end page. Look at that, we're at the end. At the end. Okay, I'm gonna close that, get out of this. I'm gonna turn off my share. And as we know that, we each have a responsibility to represent our clubs based on what your club votes are, and that's up for you to do and to decide when you get to have the voting, when you get to Denver, Colorado next week. So with that, I think it's already 9:10. Boy, we're already over 10 minutes. Want to thank everybody for being with us tonight. Yes, Marge, do you have a question?
Just one statement in regards to, and I believe it was Eric that made the comment, we do have to have an increase in dues. That there's no getting around it. We have to do something. We just got to find the correct answer. And I like the annual increasing instead of these sudden jumps every 10 years.
Yeah, it's been 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then 10 years before that. I've been in class for 30 years. Right. And this is, to keep repeating this is foolishness.
All right. So with that, I'm going to call it an evening. We will see all of you in Denver next week, or many of you in Denver next week. We will take the rest of July and part of August off. I'm already booking the calendar. I have some speakers already lined up, but I know that July gets into a lot of vacations and stuff like that. And I know that my travel schedule picks up for work. So, and I travel a lot on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. How's that go? So we'll work that, but I will put the information out. We're going to use the same link. Again, you will not have to re-register for the fall. I've already got Lee Kuan Yeung, the president-elect, on schedule. I've got 3 or 4 people already booked, so we'll get that schedule out as soon as we know, but we will take a break so that we have our own conferences and stuff to get ready for. And then we'll have a recap after the convention and go with that. So with that, I will call it an evening. Thank you all for being with us today. Again, you can I will post on Facebook where all the rest of the PowerPoints are, the rest of the presentations. I'll put this one up as soon as I get it downloaded from the cloud, and we'll put that up there, but all that information is there. You're welcome to go take a look at that. And we will see you in Denver. So thank you, everybody. See you next week.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Night. Thank you.
Good luck
night.
to everybody.